Góðan og blessaðan daginn, and welcome to Litla Gróðurhúsa Familia. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Jelena Ćirić. Hello, Jelena. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. This is my favorite view in the city, so
I
it's
agree
really
to
nice to be here with the ducks and with you.
Thank you so much. We are in the heart of Reykjavik city, in a greenhouse that is part of the Nordic house, and it's right beside an airport. So we might have some planes flying around.
Mhm.
I am very happy to have you here. I'm very excited to talk about your music, your work. Let's jump
Yeah.
right into it.
Let's do it.
Could you tell us about your background?
So I was born in Serbia. When I was 4.5, my family moved to Canada, and I grew up there in Toronto and started studying music there as a young kid, playing piano and taking voice lessons, and kind of did music as I was growing up. And I went to my bachelor studies there in Toronto at the University of Toronto. And then, through that, sort of was exploring different avenues in music. And after I graduated and had been working kind of in music for a year, I decided to do a master's program at the Berklee College of Music in Valencia in Spain. They had just opened a campus there, so I went and lived there for a year and did this amazing program. And from there I went to Mexico for a couple of years where I got work teaching music. And from Mexico I moved to Iceland, so sometimes I call myself a professional immigrant.
You have been around.
Yeah. It's I've been very lucky, really, to be able to live in all these places and just experience life in so many different places.
Let me just bring up to our conversation for the people that are watching us that you speak several languages fluently.
Yeah, I mean, different levels of fluency, I guess. But yeah, I've always been a language person. I think those are the two things that have always been kind of constants in my life is language or words and music. And I think, writing songs with words and music and telling stories using those two things is just something that was a natural progression for me. Yeah.
And could you tell us more about all the variety of things that you do?
So I work as a journalist at the magazine Iceland Review, where I write about Icelandic culture and community and society. And I feel like that's very related to songwriting and being a musician as well, because you're just using words to craft a story in a sort of different form. And it's been a really wonderful way to get to know Iceland and the community and society in Iceland through kind of meeting all kinds of people, doing super interesting projects and talking to them and then writing about it and sharing what they do with others. I also work as a translator, translating from Icelandic to English. And that's something that I only started doing after living in Iceland for a couple of years, but it's something that feels like my whole life I've kind of been preparing to be a translator. It feels very natural. I feel like I've always been kind of between many different worlds. For example, when I was growing up, my culture within my household was very Serbian, but out in the broader society was very Canadian. And I always had all these questions about kind of where I belong and where I fit in and what's my identity. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that maybe my role is sort of to be this in-between person, this connector, that connects people like a translator does, or an interpreter, or a musician that brings people together and facilitates this kind of sharing of experience and of stories. And I'm really happy with that role, in all the different capacities that I have done it so far.
How was your childhood? Were you raised in music? Your parents had music at home?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting actually that both my parents, they grew up on farms in Serbia in the 60s, and so they didn't have access to music education themselves. And yet, as adults, they really valued music and had a lot of respect for musicians, which I think is not something that is necessarily a given when you haven't had that experience yourself growing up. But maybe that's the very reason, because they didn't have that access. They wanted to give me and my sister kind of access to music lessons and that sort of thing. So they always really encouraged me to pursue music and always supported me within music. And in terms of within the household as well, they were always sharing Serbian music with us and Serbian culture. And so I feel like I got a really good education in Serbian folk music. I also was part of a dance group, a Serbian folk dance group when I was growing up in Toronto as well, because there's a really big community of Serbian people and people from the former Yugoslavia in Toronto as well.
I read that you are influenced by folk melodies from folk Balkan music. How has that influenced you?
Yeah, I think it's just something that I absorbed growing up, both dancing, Serbian folk dances and the songs that you sing with them, and the music that was playing in my household, and then as a kid also traveling back to Serbia and to visit relatives during the summer vacations and stuff like that. So I think that influence is there. I don't know if it's very obvious or easy for everyone to hear necessarily, but I think it's something that's a part of me, and I'm sure that it comes out through the melodies and the rhythms in my music at times. It's such a rich musical tradition, and it's so interwoven and kind of shared between all of these countries in the Balkans, because the borders that exist there today haven't really existed there for very long. And despite borders, I think the beautiful thing about music is that it moves across borders. It doesn't need a passport, and so the music from the Balkans has just been really influenced by so many different traditions. A lot of the Balkan Peninsula was part of the Ottoman Empire, for example, and so there was a huge influence from Turkish music and just Middle Eastern music as well, and I think that that's very apparent when you listen to Balkan music, just in terms of the rhythms and the scales that are used. And there are just all sorts of different influences that have been kind of shared between the countries. I really love the vocal traditions in particular. There's a lot of just a cappella vocal music that people used to kind of sing in the villages while they were doing all sorts of daily work, while they were watching sheep in the mountains, or while they were just harvesting grain in the fields. And, you have these really beautiful traditions where, groups of women or groups of men are singing together as they work. And I just think it's so beautiful, that role of music, of kind of bringing people together and helping people kind of complete their tasks and get through the day and all of that.
Talking about you moving around and all these places that you have called home in different times in your life, how has that influenced your music production?
I think for me, that has been kind of the main question that I explore in my music, in terms of who am I, what is my identity, where do I belong, where is home? And it's something that I very concretely kind of explore in my songs. And I don't think I necessarily find answers to those questions, but music has for me always been kind of a space where I can explore those kinds of questions, and that's why my two most recent EPs are called Shelters 1 and 2, because to me the music is a sort of shelter where I can kind of go in, and it's a safe space where I can ask these questions and kind of explore them and see what comes up. And I think, along with sort of being this theme that I very much explore, just having had the privilege of living in a lot of different places, I think I've definitely gathered influences from those places. And most recently, being in Iceland, I think just the really rich musical community here has definitely helped me and encouraged me and influenced me, both kind of practically and musically as well, in terms of what my music sounds like.
What do you think is the role of music in a world like today's world?
Yeah, it's a very big question. And it's a question I've been thinking a lot about lately, especially with what's happening in Gaza. Just following such horrible events happening in the world, I think for many artists and musicians and creators, the first reaction you often have is sort of one of helplessness, of, well, my work is just such an ephemeral thing, and what use could it possibly have in a situation that's very real, very physical, very dangerous for people? What's the purpose of just writing some songs?
What can we do to help?
How can that possibly change anything? I think one of the roles of music is to create a space where people can process emotion, where people can address certain things that they're thinking or feeling. I think it has a really strong community factor of bringing people together. And as long as we're bringing people together, we're facilitating conversations, important conversations, and we're preventing people from constantly being separated into opposing groups. I think it also is just the most important role of music, probably, in my opinion, is helping us imagine a different kind of world. I think that's really the role of the arts in general, and the most important role that they have, because if we're not happy with the world that we're living in, we need to find some way to change it. And the first step towards changing it is being able to imagine that another world is even possible. But if we help each other imagine and realize that the world can be different, then maybe we have some hope of creating that different and better world, hopefully.
Thank you for reminding us of all of this. How can you, or how do you use your platforms to enable people?
That's a very good question, and it's something I'm thinking about as well these days a lot. I think we have a dual role kind of as creators and just as people that are part of the communities that we live in and the global community. And I think our role is sort of two-part. You know, we can engage people through our music and through the things that we create, and I hope that my music and my art does that. But I think we also have personal responsibility to not be silent when we see things that we don't agree with, and when we see things that we believe are not okay, and to speak out. And I think to always be considering how our creative practice or how our art can be aligned with our values. And so it's something that I think I want to be better at, and I'm working at, hopefully, actively, you know, just aligning both the content and the way that I share my art with what my values are, just in general in the world.
Yeah, and as you said, bringing these conversations up to discussion when sometimes they haven't, sometimes since are very difficult conversations, people might be afraid to address them. I was actually talking recently to a couple of friends that, just like you and me, are not born in Iceland, and they were expressing that they feel afraid of attending to protests or even like sharing certain kind of content, because they are, or we are, in the middle of migratory processes, and so people feel afraid that might affect them or affect the processes to stay in Iceland.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think it's a very legitimate fear for many reasons, and I think we're all afraid. We're all afraid of how people might react to the things that we say. We often focus so much on our individual safety because our society tells us that that's the only way that we can be safe. But really the way to truly be safe is through collective safety. And if we stand up for others in whatever capacity and whatever role we feel like we're able to do that, then we're always helping people who are less advantaged than us. And I think in terms of people here, I mean, I'm very aware that not everybody in Iceland feels safe going to protests for many different ways. And I think as long as I feel safe doing that, then it's something that I can do to support those people, the people that for whatever reason can't be, out on the street, even though they support the cause. And I think we all have our roles, and it's something that we're constantly thinking about, or should constantly be thinking about, and reconsidering, how do I align my actions with my values? How do I align my art with my values and my reality?
And the reality,
yeah, absolutely.
And also to remember that there are different ways in which we can support.
Yeah.
Even if it's, if you can do one, you can do another one.
Yeah.
But I would like to talk more about your music. How do you approach songwriting?
For me, I think it's just a very simple kind of organic process, I guess. Just sitting down at the piano mostly and just putting thoughts together. I'll write lyrics and melodies and chord progressions kind of at the same time. I don't tend to do one and then the other. Some people work that way. But for me, I'll get little snippets of ideas. Maybe I have an idea for a lyric, just one line, and then maybe I have a few chords that I'm kind of stringing together and I like the sound of them, and then I'll play that together and then I'll repeat it and I'll try different things, and it just kind of develops in that way. I often am working on several songs at once, and I find it's really helpful to be able to put something aside and work on something else, because you always are going to hit up against walls in your process where you think, okay, I don't know where I can take this, and then putting it aside and looking at something else and then coming back to it, I find is really helpful to me. I sometimes feel like I have a very slow process, and I'm trying to just accept that and just accept that that's the way that I work. I think there's a lot of pressure nowadays to constantly be putting things out in the world, like constantly be releasing, just to keep people's attention, because it stays that we just all have such short attention spans these days.
To feed the algorithms.
Yeah, but I think also when you take that time to really go into yourself and create the space that you need to be creative without thinking about what other people are thinking, or without immediately having a plan of, well, I'm writing this thing because I'm going to release it next month, and then and I want to have this kind of impact, or I want people to think this or that. If we really give ourselves space away from that, I think it pays off artistically. And of course, it's easier said than done nowadays. But yeah, I think for me, it's really important to have a space where I feel really safe and have time, where I don't feel like I'm rushing to produce something or to write something, and I have an afternoon or I have a day where I can just sit down and I know I don't have to be somewhere in an hour or two, and so I can really just kind of let my mind wander and do its thing. But those are ideal circumstances, and we write in all kinds of circumstances. So.
I must say though that at least in my personal opinion, I can feel that that care and that you put into all your music. It's something that it's palpable. Let's go into your EP, Shelters, that you released soon to be 4 years ago in 2020. How did that come to be?
So it was a collection of songs that I wrote kind of in my first years in Iceland, for the most part. And I was kind of working for a long time on recording demos, first recording the piano, then doing the vocals, and then other instruments. And it was a very slow process. Like I said, I tend to have a very slow process, I feel. But I've been trying to adopt a more Icelandic attitude in music.
Which is what? What is the Icelandic attitude?
Which for me is to just do things. It's just very gung-ho. Like I feel like Icelandic people in general, but also creative Icelanders, they tend to have an idea and then they just execute it. They just go, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then they just do it. And they don't have this thought process of, oh, but am I allowed to do that? Or do I have the resources to do that? Or should I be the person doing that? Or am I qualified enough? And, they just do it. And I think a lot of great projects come out of this attitude of just doing and not overthinking and not kind of getting in your own way by thinking about all the problems that could arise, or by being a perfectionist and wanting to only put out, something that you're 100% perfectly happy with, because that's pretty impossible, I think.
Yeah, how to measure that? How to balance being a perfectionist? Because I think that a certain level of being a perfectionist just makes things better. But if it's too much, it makes you stuck. How do you balance this?
I think everybody has to find their own balance. And I think for me, I spent a lot of time too far in one direction. So now I'm trying to, swing back in the other direction of being more free and just kind of putting things out there. And I think it helps me personally have more momentum. But at the same time, recognizing that I do need my time to work on certain things. And I think it's a question of sort of listening to the inner voice of what is a good pace for you. Why are you, releasing something or not releasing something? Is it because you don't think it's good enough? Or is it because you really didn't have enough time to work on it and it's not, polished the way that you'd like? And yeah, I think everyone just kind of has to find their own balance, and maybe it's constantly shifting,
Yeah. And bridging into your most recent EP, Shelters 2, earlier you mentioned that you consider yourself a professional immigrant. And in Shelters 2, there is this particular song, Fig Tree, which I find very interesting. If I'm not wrong, Fig Tree is inspired by your grandmother's garden and a fig tree that was there.
Yeah.
And this figure of fig tree, it's representing the figure of an immigrant.
Yeah, so the story of how that song was written is very interesting, actually, because I was working with a small label called Paradis Sessions at the time, and the guy running that label, James Cox, he thought it would be really cool to record a video in a lighthouse, in Grotta Lighthouse out at Seltjarnarnes. And because everything in Iceland is so easygoing, he just called up the lighthouse manager and was just like, hey, we'd like to record this video in there, and would that be cool? And the guy said, yeah, of course, just come pick up the key, and just gave him the key to the lighthouse, as one does. And so we went there, and we had this plan. Okay, we're going to record in the lighthouse, and as you know, it's a very kind of narrow space. You've got a lot of stairs to get up to the top, where it's got these great acoustics. But I thought, okay, there's no piano in there. It would be really annoying to bring a keyboard in there. I'm not sure that there's actually a place where I could even plug it in. So why don't I just write an a cappella song, like something I can just sing without any accompaniment? And maybe it was the image of the lighthouse and the ocean that kind of brought up these images of kind of where I was living and how it was contrasted from, where I'm from. That really kind of brought the song to life somehow. But it kind of originated from this very practical reasoning of, okay, I just have to have a song that I can sing without a keyboard, and that it works just on its own like that.
How was it for you to move to Iceland? What is your experience framing yourself in the Icelandic society?
Yeah, also a very complex experience. So I moved here in 2016. The first winter in particular was difficult. I moved here from Mexico, so it was a huge change, which you completely understand as well. Did you move here directly from Mexico?
I moved
as
here
well?
directly
Yeah.
from Mexico.
Yeah, you hadn't lived anywhere else.
And the first winter was pretty complicated too.
Yeah, I can imagine,
challenging.
at least I grew up in Canada, so I knew, had some experience of cold and that sort of thing, but the darkness here, the way that the days get so short, that's very difficult. And I think it's just more difficult when you're new and you don't have a strong social network yet. You maybe haven't made a lot of friends in a new place, and so you feel very isolated, and I felt very isolated. And I have sometimes said that I think the experience of being an immigrant is a creative experience in a way, because you have to recreate who you are in a new environment. Because when you lift yourself up from the environment that you're used to being in, and from all of your social connections and your work connections and your creative work and all this stuff, and you put yourself in a new environment, you can almost feel like you're not the same person anymore. I found myself asking myself a lot, am I a musician? Am I a creator? Who am I in this new environment? Because the people around you maybe don't know yet, the things that you're capable of and the things that you do.
It's like building a new identity every time you frame yourself in a new space.
Yeah, and it's not possible to rebuild yourself in exactly the same way,
No.
which is why I think it is really a creative process, immigration. You know?
And I think I would like to add, it can be a very healing process. It gives you the chance to work on things that you perhaps didn't have in your context.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it gives you a chance to recreate yourself maybe in a better way, or change certain things for the better. I think that's absolutely true, and I think often it gives you, at the very least, space to kind of reconsider your life, because you're building it up again. Of kind of, well, what do I want to do with my time, you know, in this new home, and what do I want to focus on, and how do I want to organize my life? Because you have that moment when you're new somewhere where you don't yet have all of the social obligations and all the structure of the, you know, the life that you had in the place where you were really rooted. So I think, yeah, Iceland has, you know, allowed me to do that in many ways, definitely. And you know, it's never an easy experience, and it's never completely positive, the experience of relocating and moving somewhere new. But I am grateful for many things about Iceland, and I feel at home here, and I feel like this is my home. And I've worked really hard to make it my home, and to be a part of the community here and contribute what I think are the best things I can contribute creatively and in other ways. And I feel in many ways accepted by the community, particularly the creative and the music community here. And Hopnut House, where we both have our studio spaces, has been a huge part of that for sure.
What is
so
home?
Yeah.
Home. You
Home,
mentioned that that beautiful and big word as well.
Yeah, that big word. Yeah. I think I'm a very lucky person that I feel at home in multiple places and in different ways. You know, Iceland is my home. It's where I live. And when I leave here and when I return here, I feel like I'm coming home. But I do still feel at home in Toronto. And I feel at home in, you know, my parents' home there. And I feel at home in Serbia in a very different way. I feel like when I go there, you know, there's a part of me that kind of reawakens that maybe isn't always present in my day-to-day life here. So I feel very like it's a challenge sometimes, because you feel like parts of yourself are kind of scattered around the world, but I think it's also an incredible privilege as well.
I agree. Do you have a definition for home?
I haven't thought about it in such concrete terms, but I think it's more of a feeling than a physical place, maybe. It's a certain feeling of comfort, and a certain feeling of kind of, I can just, you know, be who I am here. I don't have to put on a front or pretend I'm somebody else or change myself to fit in. I can just be who I am.
Yeah. And talking again about the Icelandic society, how has your experience been? Have you found open doors? Have you found the Icelandic society being accessible and inclusive?
I think having lived in Mexico before I lived here, I experienced quite a contrast in terms of, I think, how immigrants are treated, at least the sort of immigrant that I am. I moved to Mexico to teach at a university, and I felt so welcomed and valued, really. And you know, people would say to me very explicitly, like, "Thank you so much for coming here and sharing your knowledge and, you know, sharing your expertise and bringing something here that, you know, many of my students didn't have the ability to access, you know, to go abroad and study music." And in general, I felt very much like people like myself who came and were sharing knowledge were really appreciated and valued. And I would have to say that I don't think the same is true in Iceland in general in the wider society. At least that's not my personal experience. However, I have been super lucky to have met many individuals within Icelandic society that have been incredibly supportive and open and interested in what I do. And I think, especially in the beginning, when you first move somewhere, just having one or two people or three people that are curious about you, that open a door for you, that give you an opportunity, that say, hey, let's do a concert together. I want to hear your music.
That means the world.
It means so much, and it really just having really one door open like that just opens so many more doors. And for me, the choir that I joined very early on, Kliður, which was called Chorus in the past, was really a door like that and really introduced me to so many other musicians that were doing really interesting things. One of them was Marteinn Sindri Jónsson, and he was one of the few people that in the beginning was one of these people that was, oh, you're writing music, okay, maybe we could do a show together, And I feel like, just having one or two friends like that really gets the ball rolling and really kind of builds your confidence and helps you sort of establish those roots. So I feel that there are a lot of people in Iceland that do kind of appreciate what immigrants and what diversity bring. I feel like systemically, like there's so much more we could do so that the society can really receive the full potential of all the people that do move here and that want to establish themselves here and that want to contribute. Because, at least speaking from my own personal experience, what I most want as an immigrant is to be an active, contributing member of this community where I live.
We come to this place really trying to bring the very best version of ourselves. So I think it's very important what you're saying, and very important to have these people and to be these people that are lending a hand and opening a door for you when you are just recently arrived in Iceland. You've talked about Mexico, and Mexico, of course, has is one of my homes. Yeah. It's a place where I was born. What's your favorite Mexican dish?
My favorite Mexican dish? That's so good. Such a good question. It's so hard to choose because there's so many good ones. But I moved there in September. One of the first things that I had was chiles en nogada, which is like a national dish that's made to celebrate Mexican Independence Day. Yeah, and it has the colors of the Mexican flag. So you have these green peppers, and they're stuffed with like rice and meat and things. And then they have this beautiful white sauce with, I think, hazelnuts or something. Yeah, and then with pomegranate seeds on top and
some cream.
And cream, and it's just so delicious. So that's one dish I think of when I think of Mexico. But there's so many good ones, and just the quality of fruits and vegetables and things that we could have a whole 20-minute interview about
what can
food
I
in
say?
Mexico. But I'll say one anecdote of there's so many amazing fruits, and there's so many ice cream flavors made from these fruits. Yeah. Like mamey, I didn't know what that was. I don't even know how to describe that really. It's like it looks like a coconut on the inside and like a sweet potato coconut on the outside and a sweet potato on the inside.
That's a good way to describe it.
And it's just so sweet, and it's really good in ice creams and things like that. And when I was teaching at the university where I was teaching, I would be walking to teach in the morning, walking to the campus, and I would go by this courtyard where all the ice cream sellers were preparing the ice cream that they would like sell on the street later in the afternoon. And so I'd go by the courtyard and I'd peek in, and they would be there with their huge tubs of cream and fruit and just like mixing it by hand,
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just so much delicious food in Mexico. I was there for 2 years. So I lived there between 2014 and 2016. And I was living in a town called Jalapa, in the Veracruz province, so in the eastern part of Mexico. And it's a really culturally rich town. It's a university town, so there's a lot of young people, there's a lot of live music happening all the time. And it's a place where I was teaching jazz, and there was really a lot of jazz happening. So musically, for me, it was a place where I was not only teaching, but performing a lot of jazz music, and really getting to know that tradition better. But I think in Mexico, because it was something that maybe arrived to Mexico a little bit later people were still really excited about it, at least within this community. And there were so many creative approaches to music making that were really valuable to me. And there was just so much talent in the campus. I had so many students who were incredibly talented and who have really gone really far since then as well. One of them, for example, Silvana Estrada, she's won a Grammy. She won a Latin Grammy since, many years later. And, she's just one example of many students that I had that have really achieved incredible things. And just, the Mexican musical traditions as well, the son jarocho, which is a tradition
Very
of that
rich.
area. So beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think I felt very welcomed in Mexico, and I felt, the culture and people are very welcoming and warm and open. And I think the thing that I value most is the people that I met there and learned from and got to interact with. And I think anywhere you live, just seeing people live in a different way, it really gives you the space to reconsider how you live your life and how you want to live your life. Just seeing that, different ways of living are possible.
Just want to thank you once again for being here. I thank you for this great conversation. I think we could go for hours, and there are so many other things that I would like to ask you, but we will have the time to do it again. And for the time being, you have a couple of songs that you are going to perform for us today.
I do, yeah. So one of them is called Other Girls. It's from Shelters 2, which is my EP that was just released in October 2023. And the other one is a very new song that I wrote just around Christmas time about what's happening in Gaza, really. It was one of those songs that I kind of just sat at the piano and just sort of was a way of me processing all these things I was thinking about the situation. So hopefully it gives other people space to sort of think about that as well. I'm not smarter than other girls. Don't work harder than other girls. Not more clever or more funny. My demeanor's not more sunny than other girls. I'm not more charming than other girls, more disarming than other girls, not more humble or more true. Really, I am just like others. Dark lies over Bethlehem, stretches over those the gifts of pain and woe? Where did all the wise men go? Where did all the wise men go? They rushed to put their gold in trust. They left behind a cloud of dust and a little baby crying. Oh, little baby crying out. Oh, mother in a dirty barn. Oh, father on her tired arm. We're watching through the glass. Let this be our Christmas Mass, to love a child that's not our own, to love a child that's not our own, to love